I've been what some may call a wilderness expert for almost 2 decades now. I plan my trips to various forests very carefully to ensure that I make it out alive. I bring all the supplies necessary to survive for a couple of weeks in case I get lost. And I also bring a satellite phone, GPS, and a weapon as a last resort. Sometimes getting lost in the woods is a part of the fun. As long as you know what you're doing, that is. The story that I'm sharing with you today is of a young man who didn't take all the precautions that I would recommend for a journey into an unknown forest. On my most recent expedition, into Superior National Forest in Minnesota, I came upon a journal hanging from a tree. There were only a few pages left in the journal. All the rest were torn out, to be used for kindling as the writer addresses in the journal. The contents of this journal are very strange, and I'll touch on that later. But without further ado. My name is Anthony Lawrence. I'm a student at Bermuda State University. I don't know what the exact date is, but I first came out here on August 3rd, 2017. I think it's been about 2 weeks now. If you find this journal, you can stop looking for me. I don't have much paper left in this journal, so I'll have to try and keep this short. About a week before coming out here, I got a message on Facebook from some guy saying he's looking for healthy young adventurers who wanted to earn some money. He said that he would give me $1,000 to spend 48 hours in the woods, using whatever resources I came across to stay alive. Apparently he was writing some kind of book about wilderness survival, and wanted to see what people did with their 48 hours to stay alive. He would provide each individual with a backpack containing limited supplies, and a GoPro camera to record their adventures. I used to be an Eagle Scout, so I figured sure, 2 days in the woods is nothing. And with that kind of money, I could buy a new gaming chair for my dorm, and have enough left over for pizza for the whole next semester. I messaged him back and we set up a time to meet up. I was to bring nothing other than some sturdy clothing. He said he'd provide everything I would need to survive in the woods for those 2 days. When I met with him, he seemed like a nice enough guy. Clearly, he was very wealthy too, as he dropped me off on the spot in the forest with his personal helicopter. On the flight over, he explained that the backpack had a GPS tracking device in it, so that he could find me wherever I was after the 48 hours was up, and that he would come and pick me up. I thought it was safe to assume this guy knew what he was doing, considering all the prep work that he had put into this, and so I trusted him. He dropped me off and he flew away. I spent the first few minutes sorting through what I had in the backpack. There was a simple pocket knife, which I stuffed into a front cargo pocket on my pants for quick access. I was given a small journal, which I also put in my cargo pants. And the rest of the contents were a matchbook with 2 matches, a full water bottle, one of those silver thermal blankets, some rope, and various other supplies you would expect to see in a survival kit that I doubted that I'd be using. Oh, and of course my GoPro, which I would strap to my chest. There was no map, compass, or any kind of navigation equipment. The idea, I guess, was that I was lost in the woods and I had to survive. And so I set off. I spent most of the first day hiking in as straight as a path as I could manage. Other than the clearing where we had landed, it was nothing but thick wooded area so far. My first goal was to find a source of water that I could come back to when needed, but so far no luck. I was dropped off in the early afternoon, so at this point it was starting to get dark and the temperature was dropping. I decided that I should start setting up camp. I gathered various small branches and brush from around the area, and I found a small clearing where I could start a fire without setting the whole forest ablaze. I used the tiny pocket knife to cut off smaller branches from the surrounding trees, and I got a decent-sized stockpile of wood for the night. I had to make use of some of the pages from this journal for kindling to get the fire started, and I carefully lit one of the 2 matches that I had to get it going. So far, so good. I took out the thermal blanket and I laid down next to the fire to sleep. I awoke before the rise of the sun. The fire was just a mess of ash at this point, and I didn't want to waste my other match so early getting another fire started, so I packed everything up and I set off again. After several more hours of hiking, I finally heard something that was music to my ears. Running water. A stream. At this point, my water bottle was nearly empty, so I was ecstatic that I would be able to finish it off and refill. Seriously? 2 days out here for $1,000. It's the easiest money that I've ever made. I followed the sound of the water to a small stream that seemed to go on for quite a way. After filling my bottle, I decided that I would follow the stream in the direction that it was flowing from, ideally to find a lake or something. I still had plenty of daylight left, so I kept going. I was getting pretty hungry at this point, so it would be nice to find a lake with some fish in it. But even in the worst case scenario, I could last 2 days without food, no problem. It was getting dark again, and the stream I was following was getting wider, but still no lake in sight. I should have just set up camp right then while I still had daylight, but I was determined to find this lake, and I kept going. After a couple more hours, it was just too dark to continue. There is some moonlight shining through the trees above, but not much. Not enough to keep following the stream. So I did the best that I could to gather up some more wood for another fire in the dark of the night, and I set up a makeshift campground again. I started the fire with pages from the journal for kindling again, and I used my last match. I hunkered down and I went to sleep, excited to find this lake the following morning and get some food before this guy picked me up to go back home. Loud cracking woke me up in the middle of the night, branches breaking from all around me. I sprang to my feet, startled. I wasn't sure what kind of wildlife was out here, but it could very well be bears or wolves. Adrenaline began pumping through my body, and I tried to listen for where the sounds were coming from, but I could barely hear it over my heartbeat. I had to do something though. I couldn't just stand here like an idiot waiting to be eaten. Whatever kind of animal this was, I felt like I would be safe if I could climb one of these trees. As the cracking of branches grew closer and louder, I began to climb a big pine tree near me, with plenty of branches making it easy enough to climb. The fire was dying down very quickly, but I had enough residual light to start the climb. I got up 1, 2, 3, 4 branches, probably about 6 feet from the ground, when the noises stopped. And so I stopped too. I strained my ears to listen, but again, it was difficult to hear over my heartbeat. I sat there for what seemed like an eternity, 2 of my hands gripping adjacent branches above, one of my feet supporting me, and the other foot hanging freely. Nothing but silence around me now. I thought maybe whatever it was had gone now, and that I was safe. I adjusted my grip on the tree when the branch my foot was on broke off, and I lost my grip on the branches above. I fell backwards, and I hit my head on the hard ground below, knocking me unconscious. I don't know how long I was out, but when I awoke it was still dark, even darker than before it seemed. I wasn't on the ground where I had landed though. I was on a flat surface, like a table. I tried to sit up and look around, but I couldn't move. I realized then that my hands and feet were bound to this table. I panicked, flexing every muscle in my body trying to get free of this trap. I screamed. What the hell? Over and over again. As I struggled, I heard what sounded like voices all around me, but I could not discern what the voices were saying. I thought that I was alone out here. I was literally out in the middle of nowhere. Who the hell is out here? And who the hell is strapping people down in the middle of the forest? I continued to convulse my body, feeling the bindings that were holding me down loosen ever so slightly. And that's when shit got really scary though. I don't know if I was drugged or what, but really crazy stuff started to happen. I heard a loud thumping noise. I heard branches breaking. No trees. Entire trees being snapped in half from the sound of it. Something was getting closer to me. The voices around me got louder, sounding like some kind of chanting. I quickly realized that this was some kind of sacrifice. Maybe it was all in my head. I really don't know. The absurdity of it all makes it difficult for me to believe that whatever was happening was real. The thumping and cracking of the woods grew louder and louder, until I could make out some kind of silhouette against the backdrop of the woods in front of me, barely illuminated by the moonlight. It was huge, whatever it was. It was impossibly huge. I was freaking out like I never had before. I screamed as I continued trying to free myself of the bindings holding me down. As I watched the forest being torn down in front of me, the chanting from the voices grew louder and louder. The beast was probably 100 yards away from me when I got one of my hands loose. My face was a mess of tears and snot from crying, which I hadn't realized it until now. I broke my hand free, and I quickly wiped away my face before getting to work on the other bindings. Once I had that one hand free, I was able to make quick work of the other bindings. I got my other hand free and the creature let out a deafening roar. The chanting voices around me stopped. I hastened my pace, and shakily got to work on the bindings on my feet. After a mere couple of seconds, I was free of these as well. I sprang up from the table and I began to run. I fell over almost immediately. I was incredibly dizzy. They had to have drugged me. I got back up and I continued running away from the beast. I could still hear the forest being torn down behind me, but I did not turn around to look. I just kept running, struggling to overcome the dizziness and keep upright. Whatever this thing was, it was either very slow, or it just didn't care enough to pursue me. After a few minutes of running, I could no longer hear the creature, or the breaking of trees, or the chanting voices. But I did not stop. I could not stop. Even if the creature did continue in my pursuit, chances are the source of those voices would not let their sacrifice get away that easily. Eventually, I saw the sun rising in the horizon, and I figured that I had been running for long enough. I stopped. I leaned back against a tree and I slouched to the ground. I was so scared and in so much pain from the fall from the tree, the bindings on my hands and feet, the tumble to the ground when I got free, and all the thorns and shit that I ran into during my escape. I put my head between my legs and I sobbed uncontrollably. Once I was done with my episode, I wiped off my face with my shirt and I assessed my situation. I no longer had the backpack or the GoPro. In my cargo pockets, I still had the small pocket knife. I wish that I would have realized this sooner. And this journal. But that was all. I almost had a psychotic break when I realized that without that backpack, the guy that brought me here had no way of finding me. I had to get myself together and figure out what I was going to do. The stream that I was following the previous night was nowhere near. I had no idea where I was in relation to that stream, my starting point, or even the sacrificial area that I had just run from. I was lost to begin with, but now, I was really lost. They say that if you get lost in the woods, you should stay put, so that you're not continually running away from whatever search parties are trying to find you. But I could not do that. Not with whatever that creature was out there, and the cultists or whoever they were that were helping it. I had to keep moving, and I had to come up with a plan on how I was going to get that backpack back. After a few minutes of collecting myself, I stood up and I began to walk. I didn't know where I was going, but I figured that I had like a 50% chance of finding my starting point, the cultist area, or the stream that I was following if I just kept walking. It was a few hours yet to the 48-hour mark, so he would have to come looking for me soon. Maybe if I heard his helicopter, I could somehow signal him. I walked for hours and everything was still so unfamiliar. The sun was at its highest point, but still no sound of the helicopter. I don't even know how far those people brought me from where I was at. I could be miles away from where I thought I was. I had kept walking all day. Eventually, it was getting dark again, and I was still lost. I had no supplies, and all I had was my pocket knife and my journal. One thing I learned in my time in Boy Scouts was how to start a fire by rubbing a couple of sticks together. So I took out my pocket knife and I got to work on gathering wood. I knew that I wouldn't be sleeping tonight. It was too risky, but I at least had to keep warm. After probably an hour of rubbing a couple of sticks together, I never really had the patience to get this to work before. I finally got a fire going. I had to use more pages from the journal to get the fire started, so at this point, I figured that I needed to conserve the pages. I didn't know how long I was going to be out here. As anticipated, I did not sleep at all. I just sat by the fire all night, trying to keep the flame small as to not draw any unwanted attention. Nothing ever came to bother me though. Morning came and I had been out here for almost 3 days now. I was overcome with hunger and thirst. If I was to be out here for a while, I absolutely had to find that stream again. I tried to remember which way I was walking those first 2 days, based on the position of the sun. I thought that I had figured it out and I started walking in the opposite direction, perpendicular to the way that I had been walking the day before. I walked all day in that direction and still nothing, and so I set up camp and actually slept a little bit for that night. The next day, I finally found some water. I don't know if it was the same stream as before, but it didn't matter. At least I would be able to survive a little bit longer. I brought my face down to the stream and I gulped directly from it like an animal. I was amazed at how much I was able to drink and how satisfying it was. I used some of the water to wash my face and feet, and I set off to follow the stream to its source. I followed this stream for several days. I did not want to stray too far from it, as it was the only thing really keeping me alive. Eventually though, I came across a larger portion of the stream where I saw several frogs and tadpoles. I was starving at this point. I didn't care how disgusting it was. I was going to eat these frogs, and so that's what I did. I started a small fire using the same technique that I was starting to get pretty good at, and I cooked some frogs and I ate them. People say that it tastes like chicken, and well, they're not wrong. I continued this routine of following the stream for the next couple days and it was getting wider. I was starting to think that I had found my way again, and my theory was confirmed when I saw the ashes of my fire from the second night. Luckily, I had daylight to work with this time. This is where I fell from the tree and they took me away somewhere. I'm not an expert tracker by any means, but there were definite signs of broken branches that I was able to follow, hopefully to where they brought me to. I followed this trail for a long time, and when I started to think I wasn't going to find what I was looking for, I finally saw it. I saw an opening in the forest where that beast had come through, and I saw the table where they had strapped me down. I kept my distance, assessing the area. I didn't see any signs of human or animal life, but if they took my backpack, it had to be near here. And that brings me to now. I'm writing this all down just in case I fail and I don't get the backpack. I'm going to hang this journal from a nearby tree. If I don't come back for it, that probably means that whatever was in these woods has killed me. And like I said, you can stop looking. Whatever that thing was, if it wasn't in my imagination, I have no doubt that it could kill me without much trouble. If you're reading this, I'm definitely dead. And that's all there was. There were no more blank pages to write on as if he wanted to. He had used up the rest of these pages for kindling, I guess. I searched around the area that I found the journal to see if I could find any evidence of his encounters, but I didn't see any cavities in the forest from a large creature, and I don't see any kind of table that he might have been bound to. There's no sign that any of this actually happened from what I can tell. The day that he wrote down was 2 years ago, and so I did some research. As I mentioned earlier, there is something really strange about all this, and I'm not talking about the creature that he described. It's likely that the knock on his head had him confused, and his mind was filling in the blanks for something that didn't really happen. I looked him up on Google first, and I found a missing persons report from August of 2017. So he definitely existed. And this wasn't just some prank journal somebody left in the woods. And then I looked him up on Facebook. His last post just said, "Going camping for a couple of days. I won't have any phone service. Talk to you all soon." So he didn't really tell people what he was doing. I got a hold of the boy's family and I gave them this journal, and I tried to get some more information from them. Obviously, this was very hard for them to take in, but curiosity got the better of me, and I had to know more. I convinced them to sign into their son's Facebook account, which they were able to get into as his password was saved on the home computer, and to look for the message he talked about in the journal. We found the message that he described in his journal from the guy offering $1,000. The only thing is, this guy was a ghost. He never existed. His name doesn't turn up in any results. And if it truly was a wilderness survival guide author, I would for sure have found something. But no, it all seemed to be some kind of scam. Whoever this guy was, he actually convinced this kid to go into the woods by himself, promising to pick him up after 2 days, likely with no intention of actually following through. How many kids did he do this to? Was there actually some kind of cult that he was working with, bringing them sacrifices? Well, hopefully the police will be able to find something out. I doubt that I'll ever hear the results of their findings, but I just really hope that they find this guy. I'll leave you with a little piece of advice. Never go out into the woods alone, especially without any kind of communications or navigation equipment. And for the love of God, let somebody know where you're going.